So, welcome to the Healthy Brain podcast. So, I've got my guest here, Dr. Eric Helms from 3DMJ.
How's it going?
Good, mate. Yourself?
I'm doing well. Doing
That's
well.
that's great, mate. That's great. So you're delving into strongman training now, or something like that?
Yeah, I did my first strongman competition. There was a stone and truck pull comp back first weekend in September, and then
Yeah.
I did a strongman deadlift and log press, kind of three lift powerlifting, Olympic lifting style one as well back first weekend in October. So I've done two now. I haven't done a proper like full medley event, but I plan to do that in 2020 alongside weightlifting and powerlifting. So yeah, I'm gonna see if I can break myself. It'll be good times.
That's great, man. That's fantastic, and that's what I like about you because you delve in a lot of sports. You don't just do like bodybuilding and powerlifting. You give kind of like everything else a go, and so yeah, that's really great. Just the first question I was going to ask you, mate, is just your starting point. So, like, what got you into the health and fitness industry that started you off, or pretty much grew your passion?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I was in the Air Force back in 2001 through 2005 in the U.S. and
Okay.
I'd always been like reasonably fit, but I didn't really enjoy it. So I ran track in high school. I did martial arts when I was from like five till I was, geez, till I moved. I guess I was 13. And so I was in shape, but I didn't really enjoy what I did in track. Like I wanted to be a 100-meter sprinter, but I was slow. And then I wanted to be a 200-meter sprinter, but I was still too slow. But for the 400 meters, I was not too slow and I could keep the pace. So I was all right. But the 400 meters is just a brutal race. So anyway, I didn't really enjoy it. I did it because I was good at it. I did it because I was part of a 4x4 relay team that had the potential to go to state. I didn't want to be the guy who ruined the team by dropping out because I didn't like track. Um, and
Yeah.
so, after, basically 14 years of, martial arts and track, I was in decent shape. So when I joined the Air Force, I did pretty well. And I got asked to be like on the side from my actual job in the Air Force, a physical conditioning mentor and then PT staff I volunteered for while I was in tech school. Um, so it was always something I knew I could do, but I wasn't really trained in how to, lead or teach others. I was kind of a natural extrovert, so I did okay, and I could lead by example. So anyway, after getting out of the Air Force or towards the end, I didn't really know what I wanted to do, but I knew I didn't want to keep doing what I was doing in the Air Force, and I had been attracted to lifting weights as a way to kind of deal with stress and some of the things that were going on in my life that I had trouble coping with, and it really turned into some kind of a positive pursuit from being initially a very probably self-destructive obsession. And so I decided, you know what, hell, let me go all in. So I got out of the Air Force and started just getting paid minimum wage. I was in Augusta, Georgia at the time when my wife was still in the Air Force, and just cleaning up weights, spotting people, and starting my first few PT sessions back in 2005. And I just really ended up becoming obsessed with it and did my first powerlifting meet in '06, first
Okay.
bodybuilding season in '07, and then started my career path in education and training and did both simultaneously. And fast forward now, geez, 15 years later, and I've got a doctorate in strength conditioning and a couple master's degrees, and I've done 13 shows, 17 powerlifting meets, three
Yeah.
weightlifting meets, and two strongman comps. So I guess you could say I'm all in.
Wow, that's absolutely fantastic, and it's so inspiring for like upcoming personal trainers out there that it seems like they just think that it's just personal training and that's it. That's like I've got gyms around my area where it's just your old circuit and that's it. And I think there's more to it than just being a PT. Like obviously, a perfect example is yourself, where you've delved into so many avenues of the sport. You've researched the sport so much, and you've got so many, like you've studied it and all that. Like just some people just treat it as like a job, but you treat it as like a lifestyle kind of thing. So, and that's why obviously there's people like you are very rare to find in terms of preaching all that knowledge. So that's absolutely fantastic. Yeah. So did you? So you started off with powerlifting, not bodybuilding. I thought it was bodybuilding for some reason. I don't know why. So you started off. So you started off pretty much powerlifting, and then got into bodybuilding a bit later.
I mean, yeah, from the start, I was just training to be big and strong, and then the first competition I did was powerlifting. But I had always trained for both concurrently, using the big three as lifts I did. So I didn't really ever identify myself as I'm a bodybuilder or a powerlifter necessarily, but as both. So yeah, I didn't get the opportunity to do weightlifting until I started on my second master's when I moved to New Zealand. And I thought, if I'm going to be getting into strength and conditioning and really studying that for post grad, then I should actually join a weightlifting club. I think the barrier to entry for powerlifting and bodybuilding is really low. You just need to have a gym and a place that has a barbell and a squat rack and a bench press, which I think is great, which is why it's grown so much. But it's actually difficult to get exposed to competitive weightlifting unless you actually go to a weightlifting gym. So I think had I started at a gym that had let's say a trainer who was a competitive weightlifter and they had a platform and Olympic bars and bumper plates, shit, I might have been doing weightlifting, powerlifting, and bodybuilding from the very start. It was just a matter of
A whole lot. Why not?
yeah, it's all lifting to me, right?
Yeah.
So it's just a matter of exposure. And I was actually interested in doing strongman back in '07, but it was such a underdeveloped sport at the time that there was basically two weight classes for men. There was, at least where I was in California at the time, there was 125 kilos and under, and then over 125 kilos. And I've never even been over 102 or whatever it is. So, so the lows that I had to lift, especially it being around '07 when I looked at this, I think I squat 400 pounds, deadlift 500 pounds, and bench just over 3. Like respectable numbers, but nothing. Like to be good and strongman, you have to be first a good power lifter, that level
100%.
of strength. And then you have to then do it multiple reps and with endurance and then not break yourself. So I'm only like now, 15 years later, adding about 10 to 20% to those 3 lifts at a point where, and now that they have actually broken strongman up into under 80, under 90, under 105 for men, is there any hope of me being able to even complete a medley event? So anyway, who knows where if weightlifting had been more accessible, if strongman had been more developed, I might have been doing the whole damn thing from the start. But yeah, as it was, I started with powerlifting and bodybuilding because they were the things I was exposed to, and it's probably a good thing CrossFit wasn't around popular at that time.
Oh, it's very popular here in Australia, mate.
It's popular everywhere. I just meant back in '07, when I first started.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. But I think CrossFit it's rising here. Like especially now, it's pretty much well established. Like especially where I live, there's like 2, 3, CrossFit gyms, and and then you got your chain gyms and stuff like that. But it's mostly CrossFit, which is surprising. You'd think it would just be commercial gyms, but CrossFit's starting to really kick up, which is good. I mean, it's a great sport. I mean, my friend does it, so that's fine. So speaking about what you were saying just now, that kind of ties into the second question I was about to ask. So what I was going to say is the difference between general strength training. So what I mean is like just going to the gym and just doing a circuit compared to specific goals. I think that's where people kind of like go wrong in terms of I want to get this physique or I want to be this strong or whatever, but they end up spinning their wheels because like they kind of do the same workouts or same circuits over and over again, where there's no like implementation of progressive overload or there's no main principle. So like, did you just want to like discuss that a little bit where people go wrong in that sense?
I mean, you said it right there. I think that's something that a lot of people miss is just that they need to ensure that there is actually some increase in effort as you get stronger. Progressive overload is essentially something that I think it's funny. I remember training an older woman back when I was in my early 20s, just starting as a trainer, still in Georgia, working at the YMCA. And I remember in our first session, she was like, "Oh, this is hard, but it gets easier, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." And then when it gets easier, we'll increase the load. And she was like, "So wait, when does it get easy?" And I'm like, "Well, when it gets easy, that's when you stop making progress." She was like, "Well, how much progress am I supposed to make?" Like it was a very new concept. I think
Yeah,
for most people, like if you pick up, playing a musical instrument, or if you want to start writing, or if you want to master a skill, um, you expect there to be this phase where it's very, very difficult. You learn it, and then there you enter this kind of consistent flow state. It's always easier and it's more enjoyable for that reason. But exercise is a little different in that you might master the motor skills,
mm,
but you have to keep challenging yourself to keep progressing and getting
yeah,
stronger or growing muscle. And that's
yeah,
something that I think isn't necessarily intuitive to people who are picking it up for the first time and don't have a background in, say, sport or training. So that's something that trainers have to frame. And I think if people just kind of get into lifting on their own and don't really think about it, it's very easy for them just to do a workout.
mm,
And when it gets really ridiculously easy, because you get, massively stronger compared to where you started after just a few sessions,
mm,
they'll make those initial strength gains and then just kind of stop, because then they're just
okay,
kind of maintaining a moderate level of effort doing the same stuff, like you said, maybe switching it up every once in a while, but largely spinning their wheels if they don't understand that it needs to be
yeah,
consistently challenging, and therefore you have to do either more reps or higher load or more sets or something to institute that progressive overload. And just simply knowing that can be an absolute game changer for most people, and it can turn
yeah.
6 weeks of progress into 6 years. And hopefully, by the time you actually hit a real plateau, while instituting progressive overload, you're hooked, you're addicted, you're part of the cult. And at that point, that's when you might have to start thinking about other ways to progress that
Yeah.
involve, manipulating volume, intensity, frequency.
Um, I mean, if you just want to go into the gym and run a circuit, by all means, if that's your goal, that's fine. But obviously, people think, oh yeah, I'm gonna, shred if I do high reps, and then there's that comes into like, all the bro terminology and all that. So I don't know. I just think that some people they kind of like say, with a certain program, they might knock it straight away because it's like, oh, it's not working, but they don't understand the principles behind it. So I think that's where like a lot of people go wrong, and they don't give they keep program hopping essentially, and they don't give you know one program a chance, and then they see something on Instagram and they're like, oh yeah, I'll just do this workout and I'll get a big chest in like 2 weeks or something, something ridiculous, which is yeah. So
Now,
no,
it's
that's
very important for someone like that's like one of the first stages of learning for someone who is going to get into lifting, and get into lifting more seriously, is to stop looking at programs like an individual product. Like, this Windex didn't clean my window very well. I'm going to try window wipe or whatever.
yeah,
And looking at programs like that instead of being able to look at them and go, oh, this is a purposeful combination of volume, intensity, and frequency for these exercises for this goal.
yeah,
Um, if it doesn't work, it doesn't mean bad and let me go to the next thing on the shelf. It means, okay, what's the learning opportunity here? Maybe this wasn't enough volume. Maybe it was too much volume. Maybe the lifts weren't suited for my body type. Maybe I didn't know how to move. Maybe et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or my nutrition wasn't in order. I tried to do it while cutting or anything like that. So I think that is really kind of step one. I mean, it's everyone has to start before there. There's no like it's very rare that someone's like, I've never lifted weights before, but I've read every book on exercise physiology, and now I'm going to start lifting. That's
yeah,
not really a thing. Most people get exposed to lifting either through sport, school, a brother, a friend,
yeah,
something like that. And then when they hit a plateau or they get really interested, then they dive deeper. And at that point is when it's important to get to the stage where you're no longer looking at, 5-3-1 as a thing, strong lifts as a thing. Um, and you're more so looking at them as ways to manipulate those variables. And you're understanding that you're basically just kind of borrowing the organization of training from someone else. And, that's stage one, just simply understanding that. The next stage would then be going, all right, how do I modify that to my needs? And, there's a learning curve for both of those. Most people end up making a program that is worse than simply something that's out there and popular.
mm,
And maybe even
yeah,
not very well individualized to them. But eventually, and the goal of my books and a lot of what I do is to give people the tools so they can better individualize programs.
Kind of playing around with the movement and saying, "Oh, I'll fit this exercise in, like I'll fit in a calf raise on a squat while I'm squatting," and it's like I remember my mate was doing that. I'm just like, yeah, I don't know how that's gonna go down in the long term once heavy loads come into play.
Mm.
So yeah, that's a perfect answer there. And then also coming to nutrition, that's why I think a lot of diets fail. Also, um, a lot of people get boxed into focusing on like certain food groups and cutting out the rest. So, like for example, like why it happens and what's the rectifications behind it, as in like what people can better habit themselves.
So what's the specific question?
So pretty much like why that many diets fail, like
Yeah,
when an individual starts dieting and
I would say
like
most diets fail because they are more for the behavioral components. That's less of a an understanding issue. All that comes as part of it, and more so that people go on a diet and have a specific time frame that they're going to really restrict themselves, and it requires a lot of restraint and a lot of willpower. But they have no exit strategy, and they have no plan for how to incorporate it. And that's true of even intelligent plans where you calculate your energy deficit and you track your macros and you understand that it has to do with appropriate rates of weight loss and you understand that it's calories in, calories out. You can do that. But if you have a plan that still requires, effortful restraint and it lasts 12 weeks and you don't have any exit strategy, you're just going to gain the weight back, no matter how scientific your 12-week diet approach was. Most people who want to lose weight want to maintain that weight loss. And the times when you don't want to do that are times when you're trying to get really, really lean or for a competition or a photo shoot or something like that. And in those cases, yeah, the goal is to regain that weight because you're getting to an unsustainable and healthy level of body fat in many cases. But for
yeah,
for the average person who is just trying to get in better shape and then maintain that better shape, um, the most important piece is not what you do during those 12 weeks, but how you take those habits and incorporate them into your life, and how you make it so that without effort, without restraint, without tracking, without getting the food scale out, you're able to maintain habits which, without effort and kind of automatically, help you be closer to energy balance or in a slight surplus or a slight deficit, whatever your goal might be, in a more habitual kind of automatic sense. And that comes from big picture lifestyle changes. Like, okay, I'm going to only eat at my assigned meal times. I'm only going to eat out X number of times per week. I'm going to, have the habit of drinking of water X number of times per day. I'm going to go on a walk, get my 10,000 steps, eat X number of fruits and vegetables, get at least my body weight in grams of protein times two if I'm in kg or times one if I'm in pounds. And
yeah,
those kind of things, which eventually become automatic and allow you to step away from the food scale and tracking or the meal plan, whichever approach you use, and hopefully just live a lifestyle that will maintain those behaviors. So I think the main issue is that people are too focused on just the fat loss phase. And ideally, when you're even a month or two out from finishing your fat loss phase, you should be having a whole system and a game plan and constantly be thinking about, all right, how am I going to carry this forward? How am I going to transition to maintaining this? How am I going to incorporate these lessons into my daily life?
yeah,
I can't just deny every time my partner or my friends want to go out to eat. So how am I going to make the right decisions? I can't live life hungry, or it's just a ticking time bomb before I regain the
yeah,
lost weight.
yeah,
So,
yeah,
what foods have I found sustain me? And if I increase my calories by, say, 500 after this, that'll put me in maintenance. But it needs to not be, oh, I'm going to have donuts now because I finished the diet and I deserve it. But okay, now I'm going to increase my portions of carrots and vegetables and protein and all that and fruits, etc. And maintain. I'm not doing cardio anymore, but I'm maintain more activity. So I think that's really the key is to really spend a lot of time planning that transition and focusing on developing a lifestyle change rather than following a diet, regardless of whether that diet is well set up from a scientific perspective or not.
yeah. No, great answer as always. Makes a lot of sense. I think that's where a lot of people go wrong. Like they kind of follow a meal plan like paper by paper kind of thing. Like, they follow like a too rigid structure. So I think in terms of creating those habits through and incorporating them through their lifestyle, through their work schedule, it can help a lot in terms
Mhm.
of just following something, say like a coach might give you, or say, "Oh, do this," which I've seen it a lot. And it's just like, what about, yeah, if you dare go out or something, or it's you need to plan those days, and that's where a lot of people kind of don't like that. They're not organized in terms of like setting up the diet, setting up within the long term process, and then yeah, like you said, they might finish the diet and then just go on a binge and say, oh yeah, I deserve it because I did 12 weeks. Well, yeah, but you're kind of like putting all that unnecessary weight back on, and you've got to start again, and it's just not healthy for the body, and it's for the mind, and it actually can demotivate people. And I find that people that spend too much time in diets kind of just
Yeah, I mean, the trick is to make the habits automatic. If it's something that requires your attention and your focus all the time,
yeah
you're invariably going to fail. But the beauty of habits is that they don't require you to make choices. And every time you have the opportunity to make a choice, you have the opportunity to make a choice that doesn't actually support your goals. So if you always make it so that Sunday you prep meals for the week, or if you sign up for something like a meal delivery service that gives you recipes, now, man, you've just taken the burden off of going grocery shopping. And people go, "Oh, I don't want to pay $150 a week for meal delivery service just for 3 or 4 meals." Well, it's like, well, what happens when you don't do that and you run out of time? Oh, you go out to eat anyway, and you get
yeah
something less healthy with more calories, and you end up spending the same amount. You're kind of basing that decision off of the assumption that you are actually going to buy the same ingredients yourself, look online, find recipes, and then cook every night without having it all done for you. And the reality is you're probably not, unless you're already doing that. So for someone who struggles, for example, and this is just a specific way to automate things, if you're someone who always intends to cook and go to the grocery store, but the reality is you get home from work, your vegetables go bad because you're too tired to do
mm,
it. You get pizza multiple times per week and then say, I'll do some cardio to make up for it, but you don't, or it's not enough, or you're still gaining weight, then man, look at all the times you've had unplanned trips to the restaurant, see how much money you spend in a week, and then see if that's actually more than a meal delivery service. That's one example. Other ways are just to identify what are things that you want to have become habits that you don't typically do. And then, all right, how do I make them habits? So, for example, I identified that I struggle to get in enough servings of fruit and enough fluids.
mm,
So, and that I'm always close to like the low end of what my protein intake should be for the day. So, what did I start doing? Well, I got a blender and started buying fruits at the grocery store so that my first meal is 2 to 3 pieces of fruit, a scoop of whey, and a big old as much water as I can fit in there. And now, in one quick little action every morning, I just chuck pieces of fruit, some whey, and some water in, and I've solved 3 problems. And then I've just allowed that to become my regular habit. So that's the kind of thing that people can do. And then just having, like you said, you don't want too rigid of a plan, because if you're going to travel or if the holidays come around, but you do want structure. Structure and habits are the cheat codes to being able to really get around these problems. Like if you know that every time I sit down to eat, I need to have a source of lean protein, a vegetable or a fruit, and then those are always the rules. And after that, if you are still hungry, you can have more. Okay, great. And also having fluids at each meal. If you're able to do all of those things, and that's just what you do, then a lot of other things fall into place. So much of it is, if anything you're doing requires restraint, if it requires constant attention, that's okay initially when you adopt a habit, but you need to be thinking about how do I automate everything? And the less decisions you have to make, the more time you have for life. And it actually makes everything easier. Because sure, when you've got kids, a job, a commute, and other things you're trying to do in life,
yeah
going, oh man, I have to go to the grocery store. Oh man, I have to do this. I have to do that. I got to make time for the gym. Um, yeah, I mean, think about it this way. You don't make time to brush your teeth. You don't make time to
just thought
take a shower. It's just
yeah
something that you do because it's
yeah
automatic.
Yeah.
And that if you can treat everything like that, then it becomes much easier to incorporate. And one thing I would recommend to people if they're looking how to institute these habits, because it's way more than I can get into in a podcast, is check out James Clear's book, Atomic Habits. That's a very good book on how to actually
Yeah.
institute behavior
Mm,
change in your life. That's
yeah.
a good shout out there for anyone who's interested.
No, no worries. And that helps. Yeah, a very, very great answer. Indeed. And also, like, sometimes, for example, like I've been out to restaurants and like you said, I've focused on getting like lean proteins or something, and depends on the restaurant. Sometimes you're with friends, it can be hard. However, you need to kind of structure your week to fit in like those calories, and that's what I've been starting to do now, and it's worked wonders. So, for example, if I'm out at a friend's house or something, or having a drink up or whatever, which I don't really effective nutrition strategies. So, yeah, basically, like you said, just following a structured meal plan. Um, would you say that? Would you say micronutrients is very important as well as macronutrients, like in terms of that?
Yeah, micronutrients are, yeah, getting a healthy, well-balanced diet. If you
Yeah.
want to ensure your micronutrient intake, it comes down to not having an exclusionary approach to your nutrition. Always think of, healthy eating is not trying to cut out quote unquote bad foods. The worst food might be maybe adequately described as having empty calories.
Mm,
But there's no
yeah.
foods that you eat, once and have some kind of measurable negative effect on you and are going to harm you. Um, Foods may not be providing much in the way of nutrition, like a Twinkie, for example, is providing carbs and fat and not much else. There's not a whole lot of vitamins there. And it's not that it's a bad choice to eat a Twinkie and it's a better choice to eat a banana. That's not the way you should think of it. More so, make sure you get in the fruits and the vegetables and adequate protein and the hydration, and you will ensure a good micronutrient intake. Um, and then if there's still calories left over, or if, ideally you're stepping away from calorie tracking and you're just going by a good, healthy awareness of your satiety levels and your hunger and being able to differentiate between cravings and actual hunger, then yeah, you can have the Twinkie on top of the fruits and vegetables and lean proteins and fluids. And you will have your micronutrients sorted, you'll have your energy balance sorted, and you will have all the nutrients you need to fuel exercise and repair and rebuild. And you can also enjoy a snack or a treat if you'd like. And it doesn't have to be one or the other. I think that's where people get caught up. And if you look at successfully implemented behavior change, it's much better to tell people to include foods that are healthy rather than to quote unquote exclude unhealthy foods, because there really aren't unhealthy foods. There's just foods that have more micronutrients or less, or not as much fiber, or not as much protein, etc. So if you were to, for example, I used to tell people what to avoid, and now if someone comes to me and they would like practical, elevator length trip kind of advice, I'll tell them, hey, I want you to increase your intake of fibrous green vegetables, increase your intake of lean proteins,
Yeah.
have a lean protein at each meal, increase your fluid, and increase your servings of fruits. And I'll give them huge numbers to hit. The kind of adage of aim
Okay.
for the stars. If you reach the moon, then that's still great. Like try to get 8 servings of vegetables a day and 4 pieces of fruit, and hit your body weight in pounds and protein per day from lean sources. And they go, oh, that's really hard. And even if they do half of those fruit and vegetable servings and 3/4 of that protein intake,
Mm,
they're going to be way more satiated, and it's going to displace a lot of the foods that aren't as satiating and drop their energy intake without them really trying. And so long as they're actually willing to include those habits, great, and they won't feel necessarily as restrained. It's much more difficult just to go, right, I won't eat pizza on Friday, but not know what to do and just feel like someone told you you can't be an adult anymore. Like, I want to eat pizza, damn it. Um, but if you're like, okay, I need to try to get in fruits and vegetables, and by the time that pizza rolls around, you only want to have one slice because you're so full from the rest of the day, then all of a sudden things become much easier.
yeah, exactly, 100%. And principles of any training, strength training program. So both size and strength. What would you recommend for people to focus on within their training?
Versus what should they focus on in
Yeah,
training?
yeah. It is a bit broad, actually. So basically, like, just say they want to gain size or something like that. Like, what would you want to focus on, like exercise selection? Like, would you get them doing like deadlifting, or would you just get them to lift basically just selecting movements that they're comfortable with? Like, what would your outtake be on, like, setting up like a basic hypertrophy programming or program? Sorry.
From an exercise selection standpoint?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that for hypertrophy, it's really just about putting tension on muscle tissue and progressing it over time. So
Mm.
it's people get really married to certain exercises. I think
Yeah.
they're either influenced by powerlifting, or they're influenced by a certain influencer, or just what they read online, and they think they have to squat or deadlift or bench press or overhead press, etc. And while those are great movements, they're not great movements for everyone, and they are skilled movements, and they're also high risk movements. So that if you don't have proper instruction, you might struggle to do it. And most people these days are trying to learn how to deadlift off of a YouTube video, and that's not going to go very well in most cases unless you just are a really good visual learner. But in
Yeah.
most cases, I think the exercises are not that important if all else is equal from a hypertrophy standpoint. More so, it's important to make sure that you kind of meet all of the different, like, quote unquote categories of movement. So if your goal is to holistic proportionate hypertrophy, you want to have like a vertical press, a vertical pull, a
Yeah.
horizontal press, a horizontal pull. So for example, like a dumbbell shoulder press and a lat pull down. And then say, flat or incline dumbbells press, or a dumbbell row, barbell row, machine row. If you do those four movements, vertical, horizontal, push, and pull, you're training pretty much everything in the upper body, and it's a great place to start. And then for the lower body, it's a matter of incorporating some type of squatting pattern. And when I say squatting pattern, I mean simultaneous knee extension and hip extension. So that could be a lunge, that could be a leg press, that could be a front squat, back squat, that could be a hack squat. That a lot of things could fit that bill. And then also a hip hinge pattern, where there's a lot less knee extension, and mostly it's coming at the hip. So that could be a deadlift or a good morning. That could be a hip thrust. That could be a weighted back extension. That could be an RDL. It doesn't have to be a deadlift off the ground necessarily. So if you hit those six movement categories: vertical push and pull, horizontal push and pull, squat pattern, hip hinge pattern, and you choose ones that don't cause you pain, that you're confident in your performance of, and then you progressively overload them with adequate volume, then you're in a pretty good position, and that's just as good of a start as anything else. And then, if you want to branch out into more complex barbell-based movements, then there's nothing wrong with hiring a professional, or really making sure you practice those movements until you're proficient and safe to move them. I think basic barbell proficiency is something that's undervalued, and a lot of people are trying to become powerlifting level skill with the movements just from YouTube videos, and that often doesn't go well. So
Yeah. No, that's fine. And pretty much what you just described is, like, if your goal is hypertrophy, there is people got to realize that there is a lot of movements that you can do. You're not just limited to a few.
I think, yeah, at the very least, you want to be training with people who are highly proficient in the lift. So you might want to join a powerlifting gym or a weightlifting gym. Strength is if someone says my goal is strength, they often think, oh, therefore I need to do squat, bench, deadlift, overhead press. But what if you want to increase the strength of your one arm suitcase deadlift, or your single arm overhead press? Like there's no movements you have to do if your goal is strength. If someone says my goal is strength, they go, oh, on what movement? Because strength is always expressed through a movement pattern, and then
Yep.
you have to decide which movement patterns you want to get stronger on. I think some people get caught up in the idea that, okay, I'm training for strength, that all my reps need to be below 5 and all the weights need to be heavy. And then you see them, doing a 5 rep max on a tricep pushdown. It's like, well, why? How is that helping you? If your goal is to get stronger on a bench press, then lift heavy on the bench press. A tricep pushdown is not going to really help you on a bench press very much at all. Bigger triceps might, and certainly doing 5 rep max on triceps can grow your triceps. But is that the best way to do it? Maybe you would actually do hypertrophy based training on your isolations, and then heavy training on the movements you want to get stronger on. So I think
Yeah.
understanding that principle is important. But then understanding how to move safely is really important as well, because the higher the load, arguably the higher the injury risk. You're probably not going to get hurt doing tricep pushdowns for sets of 15. But being unskilled and doing a 5 rep max deadlift, that is probably has a relatively higher injury risk. So I would generally recommend either joining a gym or working out with a partner who knows how to move, or potentially hiring a trainer. And by the way, my comment about like YouTube, it's not to say you can't learn from YouTube. It's just that YouTube can't give you feedback.
Mm.
You can watch the video. I mean, I've seen it thousands of times over the years as a trainer. Like you tell someone, all right, here's how you arch your lower back.
Yeah.
Watch me. Maintain a rigid core, and you're going to push through the floor and pull with your legs and keep your spine neutral. They go sweet, and then they immediately their hips rise, their back rounds, and they pull it off the floor, and they go like that, and you go, not exactly. So being able
Yeah.
to visually watch something and see it, and then kinesthetically produce it are not the same thing. And there's going to be a bit of a disconnect that's going to take time. So that learning process can be accelerated and made much safer if you have someone who can give you feedback. So if you're on your own, you can definitely watch videos. I highly encourage you to. There's great resources out there. We have the lifting library, for example.
Yeah.
Jeff Nippert does Technique Tuesdays, for example.
Yeah. I
Um,
love those. Yeah.
yeah, they're great. And then you can also, when you go to the gym, on your each one of your warm-up sets, record yourself, and you should be able to see like, oh shit, I'm not moving at all like I thought I was. But even then, that means you have to have a good ability to assess the movement. So I would, in general, recommend getting some outside help, getting a third party who knows what they're doing, whether that's a good workout partner who's an athlete, or whether that's training in the gym environment. Like if there's a team training session at a powerlifting gym on Fridays at 3 p.m. or whatever, attend that and humble yourself and ask for help, or actually hire a trainer, a proper strength coach, ideally. And that can really protect you and fast track your progress.
No, great response to that. I like how you described that you need to be, like you said, obviously in a strength orientated gym. That does help a lot because you've got those people that actually pretty much know the technique on how to incorporate those big movements. Whereas I find that at commercial gyms, you could be at risk of getting the wrong information on a certain exercise. They might, someone might say, "Oh, round your back" or something like that, and you kind of ingrade that poor learning technique. So I think environment's key when training for strength, like you pretty much touched on. So yeah, that's a great response to that. Just on a side tangent, with isolation exercises, do you think that what's probably the best method of progressing on those? Like, would you say like a double progression? Maybe explain to the viewers what that is, or
Sure, yeah. It depends on the movement. So most isolation movements, because you're isolating a single joint, the absolute load is going to be a lot lower. That's not always true. For example, calf raise, you're isolating your calves, but it's a very advantageous lever. So
mm,
you can move massive amounts of weight on a calf raise, and you might find that your seated calf raise, you can add 10 pounds per workout for 6 months, and go from 120 kilo plate up to 3 or 4 kilo 20 kilo plates over the course of your calf raise progression, and even keeping form pretty good over time. However, something like a bicep curl, the first time you do it, you might be able to do 6 reps with 10 kilos, and then 10 years from now, you might only be doing 6 reps with 25 kilos. And that's a pretty strong curl if you think about it.
yeah,
Right?
crazy.
Yeah, that'd be like, bodybuilder level bicep curl. And however, when you really think about it, that's only a 15 kilo increase. Like if you accomplish that over 5 years, how do you map that out? You make 3 kilo gains per year. So
Yeah,
what is that? A couple 100 grams per month. There's no way to actually increase load to match your rate of progression, because it's such a small number. So instead, it probably makes more sense, like you said, on movements like that have a low absolute load, to use double progression as one method. And double progression, simply for those who don't know what that is, it means that you progress one variable only after you've reached the progression standard on the second, or the first rather. So for example, let's say you have 3 sets that you're doing with bicep curls, and you can do sets of 10 with that 10 kilos. You go, all right, well, once I can get to sets of 15 on all 3 sets with that 10 kilos, then I will go to the next jump in weight and go to the 12s and a halves, and I'll start back at say 10 or 8. So it's basically only progressing load once you've progressed reps across all sets. So a good open method for hypertrophy is just to progress from, say, 6 reps to 15 or 20 with a given load over the number of sets you're doing. And then it really allows you to make those big jumps, like especially when you have to go from, let's say on curls, you start with 10 and there's a 12 and a half, there's a 15, and the next jump after 15 is 20, which isn't uncommon. That's a huge increase in load. That's a 33% increase in
Yeah,
load.
crazy.
Like
Yeah.
you wouldn't go week to week and go, all right, well, what did I squat last week? 100 kilos for 5. All right, I'm gonna put 133 on there, So that's a great way to get pinned, And if you can
Yeah.
do 5 reps with 100, man,
Mm.
133 might be your 1 rep max. So how are you going to go to the next progression?
Yeah.
So in general, that's a really useful way to do it. Like if you're getting 6 reps with 15 kilos, once you can get 15 reps of 15 kilos, then you're probably ready to make that jump to 20 and start over with 6 reps. And that's a useful strategy. You can even take it all the way up to triple progression, to where maybe you get 3 sets of 15 with a load, but you're not quite ready to make the jump. You can add a 4th set, and you can progress reps, then sets, then load, and start the process over again. Just so long as you're getting appropriate volume, et cetera, et cetera. But that's an important distinction to realize, that you can't just overload it can be achieved many ways. That can be from more reps. That can be training closer to failure. That can be more sets. It isn't just about adding weight to the bar. And even when you could add weight to the bar, unless you've got like little 10-gram magnets, you're not going to be able to micro load some of those single movements. So you have to progress reps.
No, perfect answer there. And also, just touching on with the isolation movements, with compound movements, you would say that there's more room for progression there. Say with the double progression, would that still apply for all those compound movements, or would you use something else?
You can absolutely use double progression on any movement. I think in general, you probably want to progress at the rate that you can, and not slow yourself down too much. There's nothing wrong with taking slow, steady progression, just adding, a few reps here week to week. But as a beginner, you'll find you can add way more than 1 rep workout to workout. So, for example, it's not uncommon, if you look at some research, for someone to increase their strength more than twice. So if they can squat, let's say 100 kilos for 5, and 12 weeks later, that might be squatting 100 kilos for 10, So just adding 1 rep at a time might be an unnecessarily slow progression. And instead, you can just add 2.5 kilos to the bar each week until you no longer can. Like if you go from 100 to 102 to 105 to 107 to 110, and you're still doing sets of 5, maybe sometime down the track, you'll go up to 120 and you'll get 554, and you go, oh, I'm not progressing as fast as I was previously. And at that point, you can slow it down a little further. A decent rule of thumb is for the lower body or kind of full body-ish compounds like a squat or a deadlift. As a beginner, you can add 5 kilos a workout. And then for the upper body compounds like a row or a press, you can add 2.5 kilos per workout. And for most people, that's pretty reasonable. Sometimes that's not the case. Like, for example, a short, small stature female on bench press may have trouble making a 2.5 kilo jump every time, and they might have to use something like double progression. But in general, you just want to think about what is the fastest progression method that I can still achieve without having to go to failure or running out of runway per se. And then once you do run out of runway, that's when you assess, okay, am I well recovered? If not, maybe I take a deload and try again. Or should I just try to slow down my method of progression to match it more closely to what I'm doing? Or do I just need to do more volume to actually get a stimulus to be getting stronger? So you do eventually come to a crossroads as a late stage novice as to whether I'm doing too much, too little, or I'm just trying to progress too fast, even if I am doing an appropriate volume. And deciphering which one of those 3 options it is, it isn't always easy, but it's important.
Yeah, I think pretty much the main rule of thumb there is just to remain patient with the progression.
Absolutely.
And a lot of people fail, like some people fail to realize that, it might take some time for them to realize that, oh shit, I'm plateauing, I need to change something up, or they might, and that's like I said at the start of the conversation, they're quick to blame the program, because it's like, oh, it's not working anymore, but it's like, no, it's just,
you're no longer a newbie. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, but that's an excellent answer right there. And then just lastly to wrap up, mate, what's new? Like any new horizons throughout the end of the year or next year, or what's Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like, yeah, we've got some cool stuff going on at 3DMJ that we're pretty excited about. We're just now have we've started the pre-sale for Lifting Library 3.0.
Yep.
So like we were talking about earlier, people do really struggle to do movements properly, and they're learning from YouTube. So we tried to create a resource to give people the best way to learn how to move. People come to us all the time, and they are unsure of why a certain muscle group isn't progressing or why a certain lift isn't progressing, and they always want to manipulate volume or frequency or something like that. And then when we actually see them move, like you go to their Instagram and you're like, oh my God, no wonder you're not progressing. You actually don't know how to perform the lift. So instead of people just kind of Googling random YouTube videos, what we've tried to do is create a resource where one of the coaches is actually performing the movement. We've videotaped it from multiple angles, and then I'm doing a voiceover talking about cues, and there's
Okay.
things that you can't just see normally from watching someone lift. We have pop-ups and highlights, changes of angle, the video
Oh,
pauses,
nice.
so that we've got all these kind of like little text call-outs. Then we also have for each movement we have programming considerations. They know how to incorporate it. So it's not quite as good as obviously having someone in person and getting coaching, but it's probably the best you can do given the technology available to us without like having like virtual reality goggles. So maybe one day we'll have the 3DMJ
Yeah.
goggles, the
Yeah.
3D goggles,
There you
right?
go, mate. New platform.
That's right,
Yeah.
3D. But
Yeah.
but until then, we're excited to keep adding more. The cool thing with the lifting library is that if someone does go to the vault and join that course, we're adding every year. We add multiple different exercises to it. So we just added 6 exercises. This is our third
Nice.
wing we've added to the library. So someone who bought it back when it first came out, their value is increasing over time. So it's kind of like it's a good thing to get in early on because we're just going to keep adding to it. So yeah, that's kind of the big thing for end of year for 3DMJ.
That's awesome, man. No, that's great, and that I think is going to help a lot of people in their lifting careers, especially that it's highly detailed as you described. So no, that's fantastic.
Thanks.
And where can no worries, man. And where can everyone find you? So just all your social channels and stuff.
Yeah, the easiest kind of one-stop shop is 3dmusclejourney.com. That is the number three, the letter D, musclejourney.com. That's kind of our whole team's place to launch off of. We have links to the books that you mentioned, the Muscle and Strength Pyramids. For the mega nerds, you can sign up to monthly
Yeah,
applications to Strength
yeah,
Sport if you want to
yeah.
stay up with the most recent research that's come out. And then also all of our free podcasts, blogs, are listed there, as well as a link to the 3DMJ Vault, which is kind of like our online school for folks who are interested in becoming students of the sport or just want to learn more about body composition or strength goals. And we have half of those courses are totally free, and even the courses that cost money, you can sign up, give us your email, and then you can get a solid like 25% of it for free to really see if it's something that's worth your dollars. So check us out there. And then if you want to follow me on a more kind of daily content basis, I'm at Helms 3DMJ on Instagram.
Perfect, mate. No, great chatting with you, Eric. Looking forward to obviously checking out that lifting library too. That's yeah. So nah, good on you, mate. That's great.
Oh,
Awesome.
cheers, man. Thank you for having me.
Excellent chat, man. Cheers.
You got it.
See you, man.